President of the Federation of Indo-German Societies in India, I offer my sincere thanks for his very generous invitation to me to give the 29th Wilhelm von Pochhammer Memorial Lecture, as also to its secretary, my valued friend, Mr. Anand Singh Bawa from our school days. There is the scholar diplomat, and there is the diplomat scholar. In a scholar diplomat, diplomacy may be expected to be scholarly. In a diplomat scholar, scholarship may be expected to be diplomatic. Wilhelm von Pochhammer's scholarship did not come from reading short books on long flights, nor from writing long books on several hopping flights. From what I have gathered about his life and his work, he spent many decades in scholarly diplomacy, during the course of which he met Lenin himself, Gandhi, Nehru, Chou En-lai, and many very regular folk who did not belong to the mastheads of history. Pochhammer reflected on his conversations with all of them, matching his observation with what was in the air, balancing the scene with the herd, before setting down his book on his principal interest, which was India. India's Road to Nationhood, his book, is not the most easy book to read. But then India is not the most easy subject to study. The annihilation of distances by digital instantaneity and the annulment of time by 24/7 multimedia immediacies has connected all capitals to New Delhi, every form and feature of reportage to South Block, North Block, and the many wired and unwired receiving points in India's capital, where breaking news is a full-time occupation and making rumors a nearly full-time occupation. By the time the world entered its 21st century, an Indian ambassador's reflexes, be they ever so quick, had been overtaken by high technologies of communication and undermined by low psychologies of misinformation. The honest-to-goodness ambassador, trained to read Nehru and Panikkar for history, the International Herald Tribune for world news, the New Yorker for enlightenment, and learn never to put the butter knife on a piece of toast or the dinner knife on his tongue, was fast becoming a curiosity. The ambassador who observed, discussed, analyzed, noted things around him, and wrote with idiomatic care and grammatical flawlessness to people who read with attention, was gone. Nobody really had the time in Delhi for all that anymore. Nobody really cared anymore to appreciate or understand the fact that culture is not about being loud, but about being restrained. That efficiency is not about being fast, but about being sound. Quick conveying, rapid absorption, what was now needed. Delhi now wanted an ambassador to send one-liners on a one-page note or two-liners in 2 minutes of talk. An ambassador was expected to render what was the equivalent of first aid, and everything being urgent, every call an immediacy, every car drive almost ambulatory, every flight out an emergency. What was called a new professionalism was in fact only a reliable uniformity, a predictable operational norm. There is a certain reassurance in standardization. For the standard minister who wants an ambassador to be standard is the standard norm. Render timely assistance, guidance, provide the right references, cite the right rules and precedents, be a rapid-fire memory system, speaking when spoken to, writing when asked to put pen to paper or finger to keyboard, never otherwise. Occasionally, an ambassador suspected of being well-read may be tapped for quotable quotes such as from Kalidasa for an Eastern audience, Gandhi for a Western audience, Tagore for East, West, North, South. But the professional ambassador needs to be an excellent excellency, not a brilliant one. Brilliance shines. Ambassadors must only provide the polish for the minister to shine. Excellencies should be excellent, but not exceptional. They should be appreciated, but not admired too much by people outside. They must deflect admiration from themselves to the minister, to the country. So, make your work, not impress. Choose your words, sift them to convey, not impress. An ambassador who knows the time and place for things is the classical envoy, the quintessential ambassador extraordinary. Samay sthan dekho pehle, bolo uske baad. But a neoclassical interpretation has now arisen, which takes away from the sifted word the beauty of what was like an beautifully uneven taffeta, replacing it with the smooth slipperiness of cheap chiffon. The gift of the sifted word and a sense of the time and place of things have always been critical for an ambassador's progress in the science or art of diplomacy. Now they are essential for the ambassador's survival. An egoless egoism, a self-denying self-centeredness, and a modest hauteur has always marked the ambassador, as it should. The hand is personal, but the handshake is official. The feet encased in close-laced Oxfords or top-of-the-vamp derbies, flat-heeled or stiletto, are all personal. The gait has to be diplomatic. The face is one's own, resembling perhaps one's grandmother or some hermit lost to the mists of time. But the expression, has to be borrowed and put on, at state functions at least, from that of the leader back home. Ayyo, one may say in Tamil. Ayyo, ayyo. The very quintessence of herself or himself, an adored host, an adorable guest, the engaging golfer, the bridge player, and the movie buff, the ambassador must graze like fleecy lamb on an equal pasture. This has always been the case, and not with ambassadors of India alone, but with ambassadors from everywhere to anywhere. But it is one thing to know, I am a symbol, another to have to vacuum out all selfhood and fill the resultant emptiness with the persona of the state being represented. Ambassadors are important now, and this is the universalism, not because one knows his Sanskrit, another her Urdu, one has Tagore on his fingertips or Yeats on her lips. One has read R.K. Narayan and another knows her Graham Greene. One can paint or perhaps pot. Both have spouses who can do all these even better and can symbolize India because they are as versatile and as varied as India, but because today they must only represent, only symbolize, and only be emblems of the emblems of official India. Be an ordinary you, but an extraordinary us. Ayyo again. Even as the plenus is slipping out of the plenipotentiary, two new powerhouses are emerging. Old in origin, they are now more plenus and potens than ever. They are one, the behemoth of national security, connected to counterpart security structures and to nameless, faceless individuals no one would like to be stuck in a lift with. And two, the megalith of commerce, with its chambers doing business with peer chambers and with restless, ruthless individuals. Ambassadors have no option but to be stuck at business lunches with both. Both powerhouses function, needless to say, in frank contempt of the niceties of that Cinderella of all diplomacy, namely protocol. And their representatives in the missions, the minister or first secretary in charge of security and his counterpart in charge of trade and commerce, are strong presences, very strong presences. The diplomatic official in the chancery dealing with security is Mr. Mind, generally Mr. Mind. That rich brain has to have the intricate circuitries of fore and aft, capable of doing a Tiruvalluvar on a Chanakya, or a Chanakya on a Tiruvalluvar, or to be more contemporary, an Assange on a Snowden on an Assange, or an Alan Rusbridger on both. He has a map of the host country, which resembles a war map, not literally, but metaphorically. And we live in metaphorical times. He has a map pegged on arms, dossiers, deals. You must understand the working of a Mauser rifle, for instance, that goes rat-a-tat, and of the chip that wafts unseen, unheard, unsuspected on the back of a fly's wing. He has work to do, dangerous, messy work, and so he is not to be messed with. Terror is the truth today. The truth none may deny. The rest is, shall we say, gift wrap or confetti. Not all of the rest, though. There is one very golden ribbon there, and that is the diplomatic official in charge of trade and commerce, investments and joint ventures. In other words, a figure of substance in the mission whose 4G database puts the ambassador's diaries in the shade. She or he, and the minister in charge of trade could be she and he. It is who buys from us and knows who buys from us and what we buy from who, and that person is the person who will make the mission rank as viable or as unviable. Ours is the age of intelligence. If her security colleague collects political intelligence, she collects market intelligence. If her map belongs to a GPS cartography of moves to, it is pegged on oil, gas, and petrodollars. Her moves are fueled by the play of the market's forces, no less belligerent than an army's. This leaves the traditional diplomatist in the ambassador with but an uncertain hold over three prerogatives of pure representation. First, the hopeless task of interesting host media in India. Second, that bane of all diplomatic missions, namely consular work. And third, the thankless duty of attending to VIP visitors from back home, coming with impossible dietary prejudices, shopping preferences, and quirks of personality that lie beyond choreography, beyond even filmography. Neither of them is so crass as to undermine the ambassador. That they will never do. But they do unwittingly often bypass the ambassador, and that is not a DLQ, not a diplomat-like quality. Ordinarily, the ambassador is surrounded by flocks of people, literally flocks, a forest of handshakes, a flowing mist of hugs, but the ambassador is lonely. A lonely figure, lonely as hell, in moments when a different clock back home and an indifferent mind will not give her, the ambassador, the instructions, much less the intelligence, and even less, cripplingly less, the wisdom to deal with an issue that has arisen in real time, agonizingly real time, at the site of the ambassador's work. Sort it yourself, the ambassador is told. These are not things for which you should turn to headquarters. Sort it. Easy to say from Raisina Hill. If sorted well, no thanks will be due. If sorted ill, God help you. But, yes, but, when occasion demands, which is ever so often, as when a Gaulish riot in Gujarat gets all Hindus painted as racist or communal, when an abominable crime in the national capital gets tendentious global media showing all of India as savage, when a sportsman testing positive has all Indian sport shown as drugging, when a minister sentenced for misappropriation gets Indian democracy itself portrayed as rotten, when all that and more happens to embarrass India, misrepresent India, and misreport India, who speaks for India abroad? Who fights for India in the lonely corridors of world opinion? Who sifts the transient from the abiding, the blatant asatya from an ambivalent satya? Who is used by an overheated India then and quietly forgotten when the heat has cooled? It is the ambassador of India, and no one else who is required to transmute herself or himself from a fleece of wool into a battering ram and raise a many-antlered head on the promontory of India's prestige. There is such a thing as the diplomatic life. There is no such thing as the diplomatic death. Death is death, murder is murder, and they are for real. Indian ambassadors have been under the cobra's hood for years and continue to do so. On the flamed wick of the Indian security guard glows the safekeeping of our ambassadors extraordinary. And this is true not just of heads of mission, but of all those who serve in diplomatic missions, for they are all clothed in the colors of diplomatic representation. The abduction and murder in 1984 of Ravindra Mhatre, a diplomatic official in India's Deputy High Commission in Birmingham, has burned itself into the history of India's diplomatic missions. 48-year-old at the time of killing, he could conceivably have retired as an ambassador in 1996 and been present in this audience today, a healthy 80-year-old. The Mhatre murder is and will always be regarded as an inflection point in the history of India's diplomatic security. Diplomatic missions share one thing with houses of cards. They stay cross-leaningly together in precarious balance because a Euclidean design of balanced fears keeps them in a state of timorous stability. Invisible airwaves of mutual reliance and of mutual insurance, delicately poised in an exact measure of dependability or non-dependability, ensure their structural integrity. The euphemism of that lovely phrase, renewed assurances of the highest consideration, is the finest piece of verbal artifice devised by affected courtesy. But it comes into real operation to hold within its coat of conviviality assurances of the highest retribution. There is a tangibly intangible or intangibly tangible protection that the Vienna Convention, by its mutually protective maneuvers, has created. Its aura, the aura of that protection, precedes armor. Its image doubles up for guards. And if the host sovereign offers guards, offers some element of what may be called local security to diplomats resident in his territory, it is because of another intangibility. The exchange of envoys is in effect a counter-positioning of vulnerability. Each envoy is a privileged guest. Each envoy is also a hostage for the security of his opposite number back home. Trouble the Cambodian in Peru, the Peruvian will be in trouble in Cambodia. And apart from the personal danger to the ambassador, there is another in which the importance of the diplomatic official in charge of security becomes all too clear, and that is a cyber attack on the mission itself. WikiLeaks are a nightmare any ambassador would and should dread. Today, ours is a multipolar world in another sense, the more than one or many superpowers being Microsoft, Apple, Google, and its own chilling sphere, of course, the IS. However good and useful her first secretary handling security matters is, an ambassador now must know cyber strategy. She may not have read Schopenhauer or Dante. She should know diplomatic and security strategy in the cyber age. He may or may not have known of the tormented soul of Albert Speer and the possibility of poisonous gases being insinuated into air-conditioned ducts. But he must know the technologies of digital warfare, the world of cyberspace, the potentialities of cyber warfare. He or she may not now today know the Queen's English, but must be a postdoc in digital English. Whether she or he knows German, French, Spanish, Arabic or not, he and she should know Java, C, C++, running Windows, Solaris, and Linux. The inherently numerate, if not mathematical mind of the Indian has lent itself like sugar in milk to diplomatic digitization. I am surprised that an Indian digital language has not yet been introduced in the cyber market, inaugurated, of course, with Bhumi Pujas and Vedic chanting under the name of mantra and mantra plus, flowing evenly, soundlessly, colorlessly, odorlessly, and of course, tastelessly. It is known that in 1948, 65, and 71, when India and Pakistan were locked in war, one of the reasons that favored a cessation of ballistics was the apprehension of the war escalating into a larger war, a world war. Today there is a danger of nuclear, chemical, or germ war blackmail. But whether another conventional or unconventional war engulfs us or not, we can be certain that a cyber war is more than likely to break out between the two countries and between them and a third player in the shape of a non-state entity. Such a war is perhaps at a low intensity already on, and it could very easily and almost at one click or swipe become the world's third war and the first using cyberspace. This possibility is having two deleterious impacts. One, the ambassador has become inevitably, inexorably digitized. Old-style individuality being replaced by digital sameness that perpetuates and multiplies itself indefinitely and without any mutation, not only leaves little room for an ambassador to be extraordinary. In fact, it requires ordinariness in the sense of non-uniqueness and unvariable predictability. Brand ambassadors may be called that by themselves or by the brands that they are selling, but they are called that by the establishment. They are recognized as that by the establishment. Call yourselves brand salesmen, brand models, brand anything, but please do not steal from the calling of Megasthenes, Mahinda, Sanghamitra, Huvansang, Fahian, Kumarajiva, and in our times Chagla, Apapant, K.R. Narayan, Muttamma, Haksar, Kaul, Jha, Dikshit, its hallowed name, ambassador. The pity is that there is no official disapproval of the brand ambassador phenomenon. So subservient has Indian diplomacy become to trade that it dare not protest this brazen misuse of the most precious word in diplomacy, ambassador. Today, the future of the Indian ambassador is uncertain. The ambassador's all too ready acceptance of her own or his own demonetization is to a large extent responsible for this uncertainty. This uncertainty has to be reversed, not for the sake of the incumbents, but for the sake of the institution. I say this because the institution of the ambassador is not about representing the Indian state alone, though that is its primary function, but representing India's civilization. Ambassadors have emerged from the need to convey messages beyond borders. An ambassador's word must follow the track of his nation's thought. If the nation is in anger, the ambassador must reflect it in the host country. But the ambassador must counsel to his own government on the desirability of parleys, even truce parleys, over the advantages of strife, hostilities, and war. If he is not heeded, a non-career diplomat can quit. Of course, a career diplomat cannot and should not even think of doing so. On the soil of accreditation, the ambassador must leave the state's signet clear, unmistakable. On the imagination of the hosts, the ambassador must leave her own mark, his own mark, lucid and unreproachable. A state appoints an ambassador. A trusty ambassador will not betray the state. But a civilization creates an ambassador. A true ambassador cannot disown it. India is, moreover, many civilizations, as Maulana Azad showed us, not one. At once austere and celebratory, bound in thought, in creation unbounded. Who, which king of her own or conqueror can tie it down? Asked by his Norwegian hosts what the Indian equivalent was to skål, an Indian ambassador did not want to say, sorry, there is none. And he did not want to say there is one. And so he did what ambassadors often have to do. He improvised, and he improvised quickly and said, skål. Oh, for skål, we have a great equivalent in Sanskrit. And raising his glass, the ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary, representing India, said, our word for skål is Chiranjeevi. Friends, to India's ambassadors extraordinary, Chiranjeevi Bhava.